everyone, how's it going? It is so good to be here in this space with you again. I hope that you have been having a wonderful day, and no matter when you're watching this, that you are just able to take a moment and pause and know that you are known and loved by God. So we're going to continue on with our series, and the series that we're doing right now is called In Your Head. And one of the things that I asked before this video was, what is a song that you enjoy listening to that takes you out of your head? And so just something that maybe is encouraging or uplifting, that's clean. And if you have that in mind, or if you're thinking right now and you're like, oh yeah, I know what song I would choose, if you could please be sure to either text me that song, or you can private message me that song, or email me. I don't care how you get me that song, but if you can get that song to me, we are going to take those songs from anyone who chooses to reply and put them on a Spotify list. And hopefully this can be yet another tool that allows you, that just helps you when you are feeling like you're in your head. One that will point you both towards community, since we as a community worked on it together, and one that we can all find encouraging and beautiful and point us towards God as well. And so I know, just as a caveat, that not every one of these songs that we choose is going to be maybe your most favorite genre of music. Like, I'm aware that there might be a country song, and while country music, if you know me, is not my most favorite thing to listen to, I am ready and so excited to hear even that country song, because I know that something about the lyrics or the music behind the song spoke to you, and that I'm going to listen to it in a different way than maybe I would normally listen to music, because I want to hear what this community finds meaningful. I want to think about how this song points you towards God, and how it does that. And this is something that we can be doing and even asking ourselves as we're listening, which will even help us get more out of our heads as we start to think about maybe what was going on in someone else's head as they chose this song that they find joy in, delight in, that they just find something beautiful in. So that's our little blurb. I'm going to circle back to that at the end of this talk, but just please be sure to do that, because I think it's going to be a really cool tool and just really gift for all of us to experience. All right, so we're studying this series about being in our heads, and the first week we talked about how what we really think about ourselves impacts our relationships with each other, with God, and the actions that we choose to take. And then we spent some time identifying a false belief that we have about ourselves, and we learned that while most likely these false beliefs we carry aren't going to go away overnight, we do have a choice in how we interact with those. And so we've learned that one of our choices we have is to be silent with God and listen to the voice of truth that just wants so badly to speak to us. And then last week, we learned that we have the choice to choose community and reach out when we find ourselves in our heads. And now tonight, we are going to learn about another choice we have when these false beliefs that we are tempted to listen to start creeping in. But first, of course, a story. So in 2016, you all know that Creed went to the ICU, and that continued to be a struggle for our family, for Creed, for multiple years after that. And also during that time, our van blew 2 engines, our basement flooded, my parents and my brother were going through a really hard time. Riker was also really, really sick. We had to cancel plans over and over again, yada, yada, yada. And we just overall, when I say we, Adam and I, we just overall began to expect the worst. Anytime we saw something with the potential for goodness to be experienced, like a date night, or a vacation, or a hangout with friends, we just assumed it would get canceled or something would go terribly wrong during it. And if I'm being completely honest, during this season, most of the time we were right about that. But here's the thing about this expectation and way of seeing things that started to get me especially in trouble. Because I generally expected the worst, I began to lose my ability to see the good. I lost my ability to take delight in anything because I was constantly just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was constantly on guard, and so even when I did feel joy, I was convinced it wasn't going to last or that there just wasn't going to be enough. Finding joy and delight in things started to feel, at best, like I was setting myself up for disappointment, and at worst, like I was inviting disaster. Like, Brianna, if you're getting excited about something, you are just inviting the chance for something to go wrong. It felt really risky or vulnerable to hope for good things, and even more so to let my guard down and experience those good things that were currently happening. Because what if they got snatched away? I wonder if any of you have ever felt that way or can identify with something that I just shared. So to say that I was in my head and believing some false narratives during this time is an understatement. And what I wish I would have done differently and just known more about is I wish I would have practiced taking delight in God and paid attention to the ways that God was evident in the world around me, even in the midst of these times. So we don't talk a lot about taking delight in God and the world God created, but I wish we did, because delight in God and God's goodness tears down our walls, and it allows hope and trust and worship to just come rushing in. When we find ourselves in a thinking spiral, paying attention to false narratives such as, there's not enough, good will never come my way, I am undeserving of anything good, I am unloved, I am forgotten, I'm insignificant. When we find ourselves in these spirals, a quick way to break that cycle of thinking is to choose to practice taking delight in God and the world God has created. The idea of delighting in the Lord is kind of a hard one. I don't know, at least it is for me. For a really long time, I narrowed down this idea to mean one thing, and that was I take delight in what Jesus did for me and think over and over and over about that, and that's it. Now, I'm not saying that that's not something we should take delight in. Absolutely, we should, but that's all I thought it was. But over time, I've come to change my mind on what that means. You see, in Genesis 1, after God finishes each creative work, he declares his creation good, and then just lavishly, abundantly gives us freedom to enjoy its goodness. Meaning, not only is it okay, but we are meant to soak in, enjoy, delight in, and fully experience the richness of this world God has created. Now, unfortunately, our culture has changed the way we practice delighting, and we often overindulge or place the things we delight at the center of our lives instead of allowing those things to point us towards the creator of all those things. But just because we sometimes get it wrong doesn't mean we should run away from it. In Letters to Malcolm, C.S. Lewis talks about delight, and his advice is to begin where you are. He writes that he once thought, kind of like me, he had to start by, quote, summoning up what we believe about the goodness and greatness of God by thinking about creation and redemption and all the blessings of this life. But instead, he says, perhaps we should begin with the pleasures at hand, which for him was a walk beside a babbling brook. For me, it can look like a lot of things, but watching Riker and Creed pretend, hiking in the mountains, colors of the leaves right now in autumn, long conversations, and of course, coffee are some of those things that I delight in. And when we stop to name these things, kind of like I just did, or even better, when we begin to intentionally do or practice these things with the purpose of focusing in on the goodness of God, we kind of start to begin to see things differently. Because I think beauty and delight and joy and gratitude, these things interrupt us. They wake us up. And sometimes they even have the power to restart our hearts and our thinking. And here's what's kind of crazy. Science backs this up too. Now, I'm sure probably at this point you've heard countless studies of the brain, which shows that paying attention to the things that bring you joy and practicing gratitude literally causes your brain to produce this, to be nerdy, a neurotransmitter responsible for the feeling of happiness, which then actually tells your brain, oh, I like that was good. And so your brain begins to seek out more chances to be thankful, more chances to delight and pay attention to the things that bring it delight and express gratitude for those things. It begins this super positive cycle, which I just think is so cool. Or really, better yet, like, I just think, how cool is it that God formed us that way? So, I do remember one hospital stay with Creed that went a little differently. I was in the hospital on my birthday, and which means I'd canceled my birthday plans, so you can imagine the kind of false narratives that were going on in my head, especially the one that said, hey, Brianna, here's where we stop hoping. Things are never going to get better, and sorry, you've been forgotten. Those were the things spiraling in my head. And after being in the ER for most of the day and all night, we were finally admitted at like 4 a.m., just in time for the sun to rise and the day to begin. And I was gross, I needed coffee, and I was really sad. At about that time, in comes this nurse who took care of me in ways that were just above and beyond. He came in, first of all, with heated blankets. P.S. a thing, not like the heated blanket that has like the dial that turn on, but they're like these heated blankets that they keep in this warm heater. And I didn't even know this existed until I'd been in a hospital before with Creed. And so he brought one of those in, which was the best and is truly something that I take delight in. And then his next question was, do you like coffee? And how would you like it? Like, how do you take your coffee? And he went and got me coffee and brought it back, which was huge because I was in quarantine with Creed and I couldn't go and get my own coffee. And so this was something I took great delight in. And then he walked in with this huge bucket of small shampoos and conditioners and toothpaste and toothbrushes and soaps and asked me to pick out whatever I needed. And he left the room, and I sat there with tears in my eyes in worship to the God who provides and loves and sees me and delights in me and reminds me of this in both big and small ways all the time. So what do you delight in? What do you love? What good gifts has God provided you that you can experience in times where you might be spiraling? And how can you take delight in those things in a way that is mindful and purposeful and draws you into the goodness of God and the world God has created? How can you express gratitude for those good gifts? Is it like, do you love to go on hikes? If you do, go on one and pay attention to your senses. What do you see? What do you feel, hear, taste, touch? And how might those things tell you something about the goodness of God? Thank Him for that. What's your favorite drink? Obviously, mine's coffee. What's yours? Drink it when you are in your head and think about how it tastes. Think about why you love it, how it was created, how you were created with taste buds to enjoy that moment and gift. Thank God for that. We created this list, this playlist of songs, or at least I'm working on it as soon as I get everyone's. And it's going to be this playlist of songs we find delight in, the ones that get us out of our heads and point us to God and to the community God has given us. Maybe the next time you are in your head, you can put that playlist on and listen to it, paying attention to the things that bring you community and peace and love, comfort and joy. Philippians 4:8 says this: "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." When we find ourselves in our heads, may we remember that we have a choice to delight in God and pay attention to those things around us that are true, lovely, excellent, and praiseworthy. And in doing that, may we begin to realize that we have hope. We have not been forgotten. We are loved, and God delights in us. So, at this time, you're going to go ahead and, if you're watching this live, break out and head to your small group, which is through the link that has been provided via email or GroupMe. If you're not live, you're just watching this later at a different time, thank you. And if you want to discuss any of these things, feel free to text me, or I would love to go and talk about that with you. I also just want to bring your attention to the Facebook link that gives you your prayer and your scripture and your practice for this week. Our practice is to take time to delight. This week, do something that you love, something you find lovely or delight in, and as you do it, be aware of God's goodness and thank God for this gift. And our prayer is: God of peace and joy, thank you for the world you called good. My delight is in you, and your delight is in me. May we pray this prayer when we find ourselves in our heads. May we practice taking time to delight, and may we find ourselves delighted in by the one who created all good things. All right, thanks for coming. Love you guys.